Okay, members, can we make a start now?
Can we make a start now?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, everybody.
I don't think you need to be introduced to the officers. Know them pretty well.
Know them pretty well.
Anyway, first of all, apologies for absence, Tommy.
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies tonight from Councillor Franks, Councillor Hobson and Councillor Murphy. And we've got Councillor Edward Walker and Councillor G and Councillor Shelley here as substitutes.
Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you, Tommy.
Public participation. Is that the same as member?
Is that the same as member?
Participation. That's right, yes.
That's right, yes.
And we have Councillor Buttle here to
make a statement to ask a question, whatever it is.
Being ill yet?
Being ill yet?
Thank you very much.
5 minutes as member.
Due to the vague committee
Still free.
Much I'll launch off.
Do it now, yeah.
Do it now, yeah.
Just the vagaries of the committee system. I can't substitute for Calvin. She's moved on. So I'm here as a speaker. If I'd been sitting here, I wouldn't have had this to say really. But we have the opportunity to fill in a load of stuff about climate change in the NPPF. And there are a couple of things that I think are absolutely vital. I know I've already emailed to the CCWG and a couple of other people with some suggested comments. There's three things that really matter. One is the NPPF prologue, introduction, whatever they call it at the beginning. Their overview of what it is they want to do. I feel that you could ask them to directly reference the IPCC report for 2022 and the Climate Change Act 2008. I think both of those things need to be explicitly listed by the NPPF as things that have relevance. Because if they're explicitly listed, then we have an opportunity to actually take them seriously. Third thing is there was a written ministerial statement. I think it was August 2003. I think I might have a note. December 2023, which specified that local planning authorities cannot set higher standards and building standards for attempting to meet our net zero obligations. And I'd very much like to see that kicked into touch. And that's question 78. I'd really like to think about adding that to question 78 to our response to the NPPF consultation. Carbon budget calculators. We all know we've got to start bringing budgeting of carbon into development control of development, encouraging like lower impacts because once we've decarbonised the electricity grid and all our heating and cooling is electric, then we're not. The real impact from living somewhere will be getting there, getting back and building the thing. It's already building a house. It's got around about the same impact as living in it for 50 years. So if we could make a comment about carbon accounting, then that would be great. I think that one's in question 71. Mike's already seen the question 73, 74, 75, 76. And 80, flood risk, which I could go on about, but I think we probably know quite a lot about flood risk already. Thank you very much, committee. Glad to have addressed you.
Has anyone any specific interests at all? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, we're on to item 4 then, which is the planning policy framework and this council's response to the consultation. So first of all, if you look at the report, it starts on page 3. You see recommendations there, 1, 2 and 3. Can I ask Mike Hayes to introduce his report and summarise the proposals, please.
Thank you, Chair.
So for most members, you'll understand that the National Planning Policy Framework is the document that sets out the national planning policy for the government for England. First introduced in 2012. It's been subject to a number of changes over 12 years or so. But the most recent publication was in December 2023. The election of the new government in July has come with a desire from them to deliver economic growth and more specifically in relation to housing numbers, 1.5 million new homes over the lifetime of the current Parliament. The Chancellor of the Exchequer in a speech on the 8th of July made it very clear that they wanted to push the delivery of these two particular aspirations by looking at very quickly revisions to planning policy and the planning system. So on the 30th of July, the Secretary of State published proposals for revisions to the NPPF. This is subject to a period of 8 weeks of public consultation that ends on the 24th of September 2024. So the report that you have before you this evening summarises the contents of the proposed revisions, and it will also allow members to make a submission to the Secretary of State in relation to the consultation provisions. There are 106 questions that accompany the consultation, and members will have an opportunity to review those as we move through the meeting. What I thought I would do this evening really is to sort of set out the key issues for the District Council, and then also as part of that, as I've set out in the report, set out a sort of a commentary on the key issues that as officers we feel the District Council should focus on in terms of the response and the discussion, potentially the debate this evening. So the first element that is included within the consultation is the introduction of a revised standard methodology for the assessment of housing. What that does is it takes a different approach to the current population-based approach, and starts on a basis of stock and the number of houses that exist within each area. The new formula actually takes an approach which increases the housing numbers or housing requirement for Derbyshire Dales from the current methodology of 216 per annum to 571 dwellings per annum. The second element of the consultation proposals of probably importance to the District Council is that there is now a clearer preference for development on brownfield land. That's much more explicit than the way in which it's been written in previous versions of the NPPF, where the approach has been we need to make sure we make the most efficient use of land. This is very clear. It's saying we need to deliver brownfield land as a priority. The one aspect to that, which is sort of the theme within the commentary that we've written in the report and in the questions, is that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with any funding, particularly to deliver on brownfield sites that are in the private sector. There is funding available for brownfield sites in the public sector, but not necessarily in the private sector. So one of the things that we're suggesting in terms of responses is that there needs to be some accompanying investment on brownfield sites. The third aspect is there's a much more clearer shift away in emphasis on the delivery of affordable housing from the reliance upon, in the first instance, on discounted market housing, and a much more clearer emphasis within the guidance on making sure that we're delivering more that are needed within the social rented sector, be that affordable housing or affordable rental or social rented properties. The fourth aspect is suggestion that planning applications increase for certain types of planning application on the basis that it will aid cost recovery within local planning authorities. Local planning authorities have significant cost in running the development management and planning policy services. fees that we get
from planning applications doesn't cover the cost of that service.
So the government is
The
keen
government
to
is
make sure that the resources are there
to
deliver. So the approach they're taking is to look at increasing
planning fees.
The other aspect
of the consultation
is on
the
suggestion that
local planning authorities can set their own fees.
There are options within the consultation
about how they go about doing that.
Either that's nationally
prescribed or locally,
a local
variation to national fees.
And what we're suggesting in the response to
the government is actually having
discussed it with our development
management colleagues.
The approach that we take
is one that
looks at having a
set of national
fees, but then the opportunity for us to vary those locally depending on the circumstances. The sort of final significant element for Derbyshire Dales
is the encouragement and suggestion that strategic planning will return.
At the moment, as members will know,
a lot of the housing requirements and housing figures are
derived at a
local level, authority level,
and then if you like,
aggregated up.
What the
government is suggesting that actually, when looking at things across boundaries and across local authority areas,
there is a
need to look at things a little bit more carefully,
so that then potentially we can look at
planning at that
larger level,
be that potentially at combined authority level or another level, depending on what they feel
is appropriate. That isn't
something that's likely to come forward
in the immediate future
because it will need legislative changes to be enacted.
But nevertheless, from the
Derbyshire Dales perspective,
it will have
some potential benefit because
come on to in a minute, the way in which the standard methodology works and the approach that's taken to cooperate doesn't necessarily work and reflect the local circumstances that we find ourselves in Derbyshire Dales. So paragraph 2.6 in the report onwards sets out the commentary, and I've already highlighted some of those already. The proposed standard methodology potentially gives, in our view, some slightly odd, potentially perverse responses. Whilst it provides a methodology for delivering what the government wants to achieve in terms of an uplift to housing. If you look at the map that's provided on below paragraph 2.9, what you'll see is that there are significant increases to areas like ourselves where affordability is an issue, and many of those are rural areas. So it doesn't necessarily deliver. Whilst it delivers the numbers, it doesn't necessarily may not deliver sustainable patterns going forward, sustainable development patterns going forward. The standard methodology, as I said before, is based upon stock. So the starting point is the amount of houses we have in a district. And it doesn't necessarily address the issue of what might happen in the future by way of changes to population and household formation rates. Whilst it gives us, a number, it's an artificial number, and it may not necessarily reflect what might be likely to happen in the future. Around the standard methodology is that it is based upon local authority figures, and primarily that's done because data that is published to populate the standard methodology is only published at a local authority level. What it doesn't do is it doesn't reflect the circumstances we find ourselves with Derbyshire Dales, whereas Derbyshire Dales is split into two local planning authority areas. Part of the planning authority area is in our control, and part of the local authority area for planning purposes within the National Parks Control. There is a bit of an indication in the guidance that they will be looking to introduce a little bit more detailed information about how we might address that particular split. That is something that is likely to come at another point in time. That may well come at the point at which the NPPF is published. And in terms of the publication date, the government is saying that those
they would like to bring in and be enforced by the end of this year.
So, the government will have to work fairly hard to get to the point where they analyse the responses and then deal with any changes that they might want to introduce between now and the end of the year. The affordable housing elements of that, they generally reflect our approach and our needs as a local authority. Where the evidence we've got from previous work does suggest that affordable housing is required primarily within the affordable rental or the social rented sector. The need for things like first homes, discounted market homes, are not necessarily an appropriate part of the mix in Derbyshire, primarily because of the income to house price ratios that we have at the moment. They're somewhere in the region of about 10. One of the next issues in there is in relation to infrastructure. What the government does talk about in the consultation is primarily around what I would call big ticket infrastructure, and it doesn't necessarily reflect on the sort of issues that we face as a local authority, where actually there are lots of issues around localised extent and capacity of existing infrastructure. So one of the responses in terms of that particular aspect of consultation deals with that. As I said, on strategic planning, I think it's something that we should, as an authority, should welcome. It would allow in the future full recognition of the distinct characteristics that Derbyshire Dales and the wider Peak District have in terms of being able to sort of reflect the fact that the National Park sits in the middle. They have got statutory purposes. They have got statutory protections within legislation. Nevertheless, we need to make sure that they are living and breathing entity. But what strategic planning will do is try to allow that to be reflected, and also the impact that it would have outside of the National Park in the local planning authorities that sit either side of it, both in Derbyshire Dales and in High Peak. The fees aspect of it, we as officers would suggest we welcome, because it allows for cost recovery, for the delivery of an efficient service, potentially for additional resources, and also within that, we're suggesting that actually there is some support, or we should give some indication of support that actually the fees shouldn't necessarily just cover the development management service, but it should actually go some way to covering the costs of delivering the actual planning policy service, because at the moment all the planning policy service, my service is all delivered from the public purse, and that is done at quite some considerable expense over quite an extended period of time. So if we can recover some of the costs from the fees, invest that back into the planning policy team and the planning policy service, then the cost and the cost of public purse is reduced. Final point I want to make is in relation to the impact that it might have upon the local plan. There's a couple of points on that. One is the housing figures are significantly higher than what we've been working on over the past 3 years. And certainly the work we've been doing with the local plan subcommittee, it's significantly higher. We don't know at this moment in time what changes might be finally published in relation to standard methodology. So we're in a bit of a limbo at the moment until we get that advice and guidance as to what the final standard methodology will look like, and also in terms of the advice and guidance that we might get from the government in relation to how areas like ourselves with national parks within them are treated, and how the calculations might be taken forward for those particular localities.
is likely to will have an impact upon the timetable that we've previously agreed.
So there is likely
to be potentially for a significant delay.
The government
recognises that
in the guidance
it's now suggesting that rather than the backstop being June next year, the submission of local plans
that could then
go back to December 2026.
It is still
imperative for the district council to work on the review of the local plan and get a local plan in place as quickly as possible.
But these arrangements that are being brought forward by the government will have an impact, and we'll need to reflect upon that through the local plan subcommittee in terms of the overall timetable for the review. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you. Thank you for that, Mike. Has any member got any questions? Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Martin. Being as Derbyshire Dales is a low-populated constituency, including the national park, does that make any difference to the amount of houses we have to produce, or it'll have to go on population, won't it, really?
So the current standard methodology is based upon population forecasts. The population forecasts that are based on the moment are based on the 2014. They're 10 years out of date. However, the reason that those population forecasts haven't changed in terms of standard methodology is because actually subsequent forecasts 2016, 2018, 2020 don't necessarily deliver the aspirations that the previous government and this government would want to see, which is a significant uplift in the amount of housing that's being provided. So whilst ever that is a way of delivering it. That is not going to achieve the government's aspiration. The government wants to move away from that, and that's the reason why they want to move away from the population. But as I said in introduction, the approach that they're taking delivers an outcome, but it doesn't necessarily deliver sustainable communities, and it does deliver some potentially odd, if you like, potentially adverse outcomes, which I think across the country, government will get some pushback on. But to answer your question, it doesn't necessarily. The fact we've got a low level population, a low density population, isn't necessarily going to have any credence going forward for the district.
Yes, though we have a large budget in certain areas of the constituency, haven't we, really? The ward. So does that make any difference? I suppose not really.
We're going to have to look at trying to suggest the government that they think very carefully. One of the issues that it does throw up is that there is in some instances it doesn't necessarily create sustainable patterns of development. So one of the suggestions that we put in the report is that there should be some mechanism built into the standard methodology which tries to reflect upon sort of rurality and urban aspects of the local authority pitch, if you like. So that actually there is much more of a focus on delivery of sustainable communities and a much more focus on development in the urban areas rather than in the rural areas. When you look at the map in the report, it's quite stark in where the distribution is.
So just one final point. Being that so, Macklock, Bakewell were the main population. Will that be more of a focus on that area as well? Or what'll happen to the Peak Park area?
Well, I think in terms of the future policy, that will be dependent upon what the local plan subcommittee and the council determine going forward, depending upon what the outcome of this particular consultation throws up and what the government then subsequently publishes as the final version of the NPPF and the guidance.
Thank you, Mark.
Councillor G.
Mike, thanks for your summary. Obviously, I've had the advantage of the previous meeting last week or the week before. But given the propensity of this new guidance that the Labour government brought in relation to NPPF. Would you agree that this basically scuppers completely our existing local plan and this review that we've got? I mean, we've been doing this work now since this new council came in. And with this new guidance, it's a game changer. And I just believe that we need to be realistic here. And we've got limited resources in terms of staff. You work really hard. I'm really impressed with the way that you've delivered the local plan in 2017. You're really sensible about the way that you're going ahead your work. But this totally changes the scenario. The main thing that we're going to have to do now is basically give this response to get the best outcome for Derbyshire Dales. We ain't got time to carry on with something that's really going to be a waste of time, because there's going to be no inspector under this government who accepts the local plan that we've planned really well. But now we need to stop it and cut it off, full effort into our response to make sure that this doesn't come about, because it's going to be a total disaster for Derbyshire Dales. So we need to be realistic. We can't go on. We need to try and help ourselves the best way we can.
Chair, I think Councillor G's makes a very pertinent point. We have the local plan review started in 2020, and I think we were getting to a point where we were ready to push the button on preparation and publication of before Christmas of a draft plan. And these proposals do and will have a significant impact upon what our approach will have to be going forward. There is no doubt, as I said in the introduction, there is no doubt that it will have an impact upon the preparation of completion of the local plan. And the government's accepting that. And as part of the consultation, it's saying, local planning authorities, you'll need to take account of this guidance from basically day one that it's brought in. But they also recognise the fact that it will have an impact on local plans in preparation and in review, like ourselves. At this moment in time, I can't give you a definitive answer as to how long and what it will mean in terms of delay to the local plan, but it will result in a delay. But we will have to continue to endeavour to prepare a local plan as quickly as we can to ensure that we are in the best position to be able to say to members of the community across Derbyshire Dales that we have got a clear idea of what development will look like in the future for Derbyshire Dales, and that will set the framework for the rest of that plan period, wherever that takes us to in the future.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair.
Mike,
bearing in mind
this
increase
allocation,
whether it's 571 or whatever it is,
will have
a great proportion market housing.
What impact,
if any, is that going to have on affordability in Derbyshire Dales?
There's a couple of points from that particular question, Councillor. The first thing is that you're right. This is the premise upon which the NPPF changes are predicated is on delivery by the private sector. Now, private sector over the course of the past 10, 12 years or so haven't delivered housing at the rate which the government wants to see, which is somewhere in the region of 300,000 a year. I was on a call today with a workshop today where the government was saying that they think that this year might just get to 200,000 dwellings being completed. So whilst ever there might be an aspiration and there may well be targets within local plans for the delivery of 300,000 a year across the country. The fact that it's predicated on the private sector delivering is one where there is an element, in my view, there's an element of risk. The only time that 300,000 has necessarily been achieved is where there's been quite significant social housing stock delivered by council housing, for example. That was back in the 1960s. So there is an element of risk associated with that. But the second point in relation to affordability is that part of the standard methodology, both now and in the future, although it's refined a little bit in the proposed one, is that there is a sort of affordability multiplier built into the equation, into the sort of formula that the government have published. So the existing one is not quite as strong as the proposed one, but that, at the end of the day, doesn't necessarily mean to say that it will have an impact upon the value and prices of properties within the district. There will still be a need, I would suspect, for the delivery of affordable housing as part of the range of housing that we provide. One of the things we might need to think about is, does this have an impact upon what our overall requirements might be, what our proportions might be going forward. But I think just the sole increase in the number of housing doesn't necessarily mean that the house prices and the value of property across Derbyshire Dales will come down as a result of it.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Shelley.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Very good report, good summary, and my heart goes out to you and your team. But it's obviously a game changer, which you probably were half expecting, but maybe not in the scale to which it's being swept onto us at the moment. Just three questions, really. I think. One is I'm not sure whether Councillor Slack was alluding to this earlier or not. Didn't quite catch it. We know there's a significant number of homes which are unoccupied on a permanent basis for whatever reason in the Dales. The fact that the rules are being changed to reflect stock numbers rather than population numbers in some absurd way, which the public don't certainly understand. I wonder whether that has any implications for our ability to contest the overall numbers. In other words, we know there's a lot of buildings out there. If we can actually use them in a more constructive way, which is useful for the population, then perhaps that helps us in some way. That's my first question. The second one is that I've obviously seen the draft responses that you put into the questions. I wonder whether we can enhance the power of our response in relation to that which relates to infrastructure. We're not just a rural area. We're a rural area with some really tight constraints. So in some parts of the country where they've got lots of open countryside, you could build a dual carriageway to get somewhere. In Darley-Dale, you can't build a dual carriageway. So we're stuck. And I'd like to see some real pushback, I think, on this question of deliverability of infrastructure in a cost-effective way. So that's a reference there to the lack of support from the public purse. And in fact, the sheer impracticality of delivering some of the infrastructure that would be needed for this level of housing. And then the final point I would make is that it's all very well the government saying that they recognise what they're doing now means that there's going to be a delay, and they're allowing local authorities to submit their plans later. What this means though is that delay just exposes even more to rampant developers. There doesn't seem to be a recognition in this consultation about the real implications of that. So just today, for example, in Darley-Dale, we found out that the council's opposition to housing schemes being overturned on appeal.
And that was
a report which was
based on the
officer's recommendation to oppose it.
We are, as far as I can see,
wide open.
Derbyshire Dales is about to become like the Wild West,
as far as I can see.
Sorry for my
exaggerations.
Right.
Okay. So in terms of the 3 points, Councillor Shelley, the point you make about unoccupied properties is one that I think is valid. I think in the same way that we've got a significant amount of second homes and holiday lets that are not necessarily part of the if you like the mainstream stock. And this was a point that was raised on the workshop I was at, or on the call with today. And I think there's a potential argument to say that we need to potentially look at actually what is our stock and what is the base starting point. That is going to be the way forward. And then starting with X and then taking off those that potentially available for the sort of development and calculation of future requirements. So I think that's when we can add into the response in terms of unoccupied properties and empty properties and holiday second homes. I think that's a good point to raise. We could include that. In terms of the responses. The whole point of tonight's meeting is to allow members to be able to consider and if necessarily give their views and look at how we respond to each of those particular questions. So one of the things that we were talking about with the chair prior to the meeting is that the recommendation is one of seeking to give delegated authority to Stephen himself with the chair to finalise the response. If members have got additional issues and additional points they want to raise, then there's no reason why those can't be sent through to me by the end of next week, and then we can incorporate those into the final responses back to CLG by the 24th of September. That's an issue that members want to have incorporated, then we can look to do that. In terms of the third point, you're quite right, Councillor Shelley. The longer it takes for us and other local authorities in similar situations to prepare our local plans, more potentially exposed we become to development and the potential for speculative development. We haven't got a 5-year supply at the moment. If the changes are brought about and we are then required to use the new standard methodology, the position we find ourselves within 5-year supply will be significantly worse than we have at the moment, just by changing the starting point. And it's the reason why I say we need to move forward and continue to move forward as quickly as we can with the completion of the review.
Thank you for that, Mike. Councillor Whitehead.
It's Martin. Thanks, Mike. Great report. Quick presentation. Just wanted to explore that holiday homes. So my logic is we want those homes counted because at the moment those empty homes are homes that our communities don't live in. So we don't count them. Then actually what we end up kind of doing ourselves. But be really careful about how you phrase that. I understand what Roger's point is, but I think I take the contrary point. I think they absolutely should be counted in our overall stock. So we can ensure that actually when we're building houses, we're building to the right level. So that our families, our friends and neighbours actually have houses to move in which are affordable, rather than they just get bought up. There's more holiday lets. So I do think you have to account for them. Otherwise we'll end up with even less houses than we'd need. My questions
were:
Is there any good reason to continue with our local plan development while we await kind of the full outcome? Is the stuff that can still be progressed that you then just plug in? Because surely we'll be hopefully second guessing what it's going to say. We've got a little bit of an insight already. And so surely we'll do all that prep. Once it's finally announced, we can just plug it all in. We'll be ready with our plan. So we might not need such a delay. That was one question. And the next question was: do we think in our response we would be looking to promote ourselves as an area that wants to develop new villages, new towns? Must be a long time since Derbyshire actually had any proper new settlements. And I noticed government is talking about extra support for councils, linked to new towns. And so I just wonder whether we could put in, we don't want a new town, but we might want some new settlements. So maybe part of our answer back should be asking that question to the Secretary of State, whether there would be support for rural councils like us in terms of developing new villages and settlements. You can name one after me. I don't mind. And then I absolutely think the infrastructure question is so vital. And although I don't sit on planning anymore, all we're constantly sort of worrying about planning is if these plans get passed for any size of development, is actually the associated infrastructure that supports that, whether that be the water, the sewage, kind of even getting electricity, kind of renewables to the site, the road infrastructure. A lot of it's not fit for purpose now. So I think what I'd like to hear from the Secretary of State alongside this is actually kind of what support is there going to be for councils in terms of compelling providers to do the work. Compelling people like Severn Trent to actually upgrade the sewage before the housing development goes in, and actually engage with local authorities, because I think we all feel that Severn Trent is a poor engager and rarely communicates with us from a planning point of view very well. So yes, just a few points there, Mike. I hope that's okay.
In terms of the issue about delay, there are elements of work that we can continue with. But I try and do it simply. There's two aspects. There is the housing bit, the housing strategy. That bit is now the bit that's going to be the greatest concern for us, given the content of the revisions to the MPPF. That's the bit that we will need to think more carefully about. That's the bit that might take more time to think through what the options are and what the solutions are. However, one of the potential solutions, depending upon the outcome of this process might be the delivery of a new village. So it may well be that as part of the work we do through the local plan subcommittee, we might have to go through the process of looking at option one might be a new village to deliver it. Option two might be, for example, continuation of sustainable extensions to the market towns. So that's an element of work that will take some time to actually get to fruition. In the meantime, one of the things that we can continue to do is to deliver on looking at the detailed wording of policies within the plan. There's something like 50 to 60 policies within the plan. Each of those need to be looked at. Some of those are related to the housing aspects of it. Some of them are in relation to biodiversity and climate change, etc. We can start to continue the work, bring that forward, so that work then becomes a priority over the course of the next few months. And then when we get a clearer idea of what this is saying, we can then plug in the housing bits, as you say. The housing bit will take some time. There's no doubt. There's no two ways about it. How long that is depends upon what the scale we're looking at, and then what options we might think about. But those will be something that we'll be discussing as officers with the local plan subcommittee going forward. But yeah, we will be looking to make sure that momentum is there going in the short term.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Wayne.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks for your report. And a few questions, and then I've got some other things to say in debate. But, I'm just struggling how they've come to the figures that they've come to, and I'm only going on colours on a map. We're basically a holiday area. We've got a national park on us, and we've got to build up to 150% more houses. Devon and Cornwall, similar area, down the southwest, and also I would suggest it's probably, I'm trying to think, Somerset, Norfolk, they're only having to build 50 to 75%. Have you seen the evidence that the government have based these figures on? And have we actually had sight of that evidence? Because I can't recall seeing it. That's the first question. Do you want to answer that one first? And then
I have seen the evidence, and the evidence is based upon the stock levels that are published by CLG on an annual basis. And those essentially derive from the data that we provide to them through the council tax data. So the starting point is essentially what information we deliver to them through the council tax process.
So there's loads of holiday homes in Devon and Cornwall and North Norfolk and places like that.
You know, the starting point is the stock. So each stock will be different. Each level of stock in each area, local authority area, will be different. And the affordability multiplier will be different because it's based upon the circumstances of each individual local authority. So where there is a higher affordability ratio, that will have a greater impact upon the starting point.
Okay. My second question is, there are three, you'll be pleased to hear. How will neighbourhood plans be affected, and will they be still taken account of?
Neighbourhood plans are still a part of the mix and are still available to parish and town councils to prepare if they wish to do so.
But currently active ones, like Wirksworth, for instance, that would still be taken account of?
It will be until such times as the town or parish council determine that they wish to review them.
Okay. And the final one is one of my favourite subjects, is infrastructure and also flooding. I was really disappointed in the NPPF that they're going about infrastructure to build prisons, hospitals and courthouses. But basically, it's so much more important than that, because people have got to live in a community, and let's face it, they're going to need more prisons if they keep ramming people away as they are at the moment. But it boils down to basic, water networks and accountability. And I've said before that I would really like to see Severn Trent as a consultee at the time of the planning application, not at the time of the local plan. The Severn Trent water should be made to tell the actual LPA at the time of the planning application what the resilience is in their network, because we've got Victorian networks here that are not maintained properly and are regularly going pop. So, and it's about housing. It's about highways. We've got issues in relation to highways. Derbyshire Dales is built on a number of valleys, and at the bottom of valleys are rivers, and there are very narrow roads, as Councillor Shelley alluded to. But we've got stationary traffic in Ashbourne, we've got stationary traffic queuing up in Matlock and Bakewell, and all that's happening is the CO2, the noxious gases, are going with more traffic. It's going to gather more in these areas, and with the canyoning process, it's just going to go further and further and have a negative impact on people. So can we please put something in about infrastructure and flooding? There's nothing for us to say in relation to and I'll keep it local here, the Bentley Brook pump station at Knowlston Place. They've done a full assessment of that catchment, and that is going to be 100% compromised in about 30 to 50 years. Right? So if we continue to build here, in other towns, it's not just here, but in other towns, we're not going to end up with these with the vibrant towns and the vitality of our towns, because they're going to be just great big car parking spaces for people to get into the Peak Park. So can we please put something in about that? Thank you.
I think, one of the questions, and I can't quite find it, I'm scrolling down, but one of the questions that one of the draft responses does talk about the fact that, in essence, the government, as I said in the introduction, are looking at sort of the bigger ticket infrastructure, which they see as being priority in terms of a national context, if you like. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't address those local infrastructure issues that Councillor Wayne and others have raised now and in the past. And I've tried to frame one of the questions to reflect that, given the sort of concerns that have been raised. If there is a need for that to be bolstered and beefed up, then I'm quite happy to give some sort of consideration to sort of representations about what we put in there and how we address that.
Can I just come back for a minute, Chair? Question 84 and 85. I wrote here that no response has been made to the question, one of the questions in relation to water infrastructure in this consultation. Is that because the particular section deals with the largest scale installations? But the MPPF is about building houses, is it not, predominantly? So why are we talking about blinking prisons and courthouses and things like that, when what we're wanting to do is build infrastructure that's fit for our communities to live happily in without having the houses inundated with water? I can't understand that. So 84 and 85, one of them was no comment, which I've heard many times in my life, but that's as it is. But I think it would be nice to go a little bit further.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and I'll try and draft something up, or you'd like to draft something up and let me have that, and we can do that.
I might find a bit of something.
All right, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Councillor Buckler.
Firstly, are there proposals in here to increase the speed of development, as the private sector appears to be sitting on across the country 1 million planning permissions, and we've got plans which say you've got to have a 5-year supply, but if people aren't developing them, then that's completely irrelevant. And so all we're doing is putting in place future planning permissions is the first question. And I completely get the stuff about infrastructure, and I've said on numerous occasions about the issue that I've got with brownfield, and that you should do brownfield development at all costs everywhere. I understand completely about previous developed land, but some of our highest biodiversity areas, for example, are the old quarries we've got, which would be really expensive to develop, and the infrastructure there will be terrible to put in. Whereas you look at a greenfield development, put in a greenfield development, a new village, as has been sort of talked about, close to the A50, where you've got really good opportunity for jobs and access to access to jobs in Derby, that would have to be on a greenfield site, because there isn't any previous developed land. So I think some of the presumptions about which would alleviate some of the issues that have been talked about in terms of trying to ram more people into where the people live in Derbyshire Dales. Those sort of it's in some ways the fact that it's such a massive increase in what we need almost requires a completely different way of thinking about it, rather than trying to make the way that we've been trying to do it fit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, Councillor Buckler, and I think that's going to be the challenge that the local plan subcommittee will have to face going forward. Is given the scale of increase, if it is maintained at the level that it is, as it is set out in the consultation, then that will be a challenge for the local plan subcommittee through the review of the local plan to take on board, and that will be something that will challenge members now and at the point at which they collectively as a council will have to make decisions. In terms of the issue about the private sector, and I said before that this is predicated on the private sector delivering. There is nothing in this consultation which sets out any carrots or any sticks to the private sector to deliver. So without any changes to the current arrangements, we're going to be at the behest of the private sector and their desire to deliver at the rate they want to deliver at. So unless there are some changes which make sure that they speed up the rate of development and that they don't necessarily sit on planning permissions that they may have obtained, then we're going to be in no better position than we are at the moment. The government needs to have that message spelled out to them, in my view, because that's going to be the key to making sure that what the government wants in terms of delivering completions is actually achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I add another point about the biodiversity stuff? So, obviously I talk about biodiversity all the time. I accept that. There's a piece of work which has been done on behalf of the Environment Agency, which showed, which is about environmental equity, that the biggest impact that you can have on increasing natural capital is to protect and enhance green spaces within urban communities, because of the impact, which is going to be particularly the case with climate change, where access to green and blue infrastructure within towns and cities has a significant impact in terms of life expectancy of the people who live there, because of things like air quality, because of things like water quality, and it's thousands of years of life a year would be saved by protecting and enhancing that. And I think that the sort of presumption of infilling within urban communities is going to have a devastating impact on as climate change takes hold on people who live within those towns and villages. And as Councillor Wayne puts it, that's exactly right. If you remove the green spaces in places like Matlock and Ashbourne by infilling, we should be doing more to make those spaces more accessible rather than removing them and making them less accessible, because they're really important. I can share the report with people about the impact that it has. So I would like us to be saying more about that sort of stuff, and I will give some answers to those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Councillor. Who's next? Councillor Nash.
Thanks, Chair. One question for you before we carry on. Are we going to review the question or go through the questions tonight, or we are in its entirety? Okay, I'll restrict some of my questions till then. But Mike, thanks for the report, and that's a really good introduction. Should we be pushing back more to the government to say you need to take the strategic regional approach before we start going down this path of a local plan? Because we're going to do a lot of work, but we're essentially building houses for people where there's no jobs, there's no infrastructure, there's no railway, there's no ability for them to get to the major cities where they probably will work. And what's the point of doing it that way round? I understand the government's got a need to push on and to deliver quickly, and I understand and recognise that, but I think they've got the cart before the horse.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, Councillor Nash, on that point. Regional planning was something that set the sort of framework for how development would be distributed, both in terms of housing and economic terms, across the whole of the East Midlands. Yes, it took quite a significant amount of time to deliver the plans themselves, but nevertheless they provided a framework, and there was checks and balances in that whole process. There was an examination in public where development industry, members of the public, local authorities could argue the case why their approach was appropriate or inappropriate. And that really sort of set the framework for, and for places like Derbyshire Dales in the past, it set the framework for sort of addressing the constraints and the unique characteristics of we have, which is a local authority split in two with a national park that sits in half of it. But similarly for places like High Peak, on the other side of the national park, maybe they haven't got so much within the national park as we have, but nevertheless the same sort of issues where half of or a proportion of it, of their local authority area, is divided in and sits within the national park. And what that did was recognise the fact there was a big chunk of constraint in the middle in terms of what could be delivered in that part of the area. But it then reflected upon what that meant and how that could be then redistributed across the rest of the area and into urban areas and away from the rural areas. Those were done away with, obviously, and we've now got the situation where we as a planning authority are required to determine our own requirements. We've done that once. It was a difficult journey to get to that particular position. This is now going further than what it was before, but we're still being required to determine our figures essentially at a local level. We might be in a position, in comparison to others, where we might benefit from being within having the national park, because we might be able to argue a different case. Nevertheless, it's still going to be an increase. My fear is that even if we look at disaggregating the local authority down into two parts and using, say, for example, a stock basis, we'll end up with a situation where the amount of development that might be required in the national park part of Derbyshire Dales will be significantly higher than what the national park can accommodate and are willing to accommodate. So we end up with a situation where there will be a shortfall, or not a shortfall, but there will be a shortfall in potential delivery. And there's three options. One is it disappears into the ether. The government doesn't want us necessarily that. Two is it comes back into Derbyshire Dales as a planning authority area, as we've got now. Or thirdly, we try to seek agreement with our neighbours, and we know what the answer to that is. The answer to that will be no. So that's why for us, strategic planning at an appropriate level, be that combined authority area level or be that at a higher level, a bigger level than that, probably is the most appropriate thing we could see, because it reflects the unique circumstances we have. And that is part of the response we should be giving back to the government. That should be the way in which which is addressed. The reality is that, as I said in introduction, that is going to be some way off, unfortunately.
Thanks, Mike. Now, Councillor Chapman, and finally, I think, Councillor Councillor Lees after that.
Thanks, Chair, but I got my question answered with one of the questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on the master plan at Ashbourne Airfield, does that come within this new regime, or will it come, or is it classed as existing? Because it's not been decided yet what the master plan is. So will that housing allocation be added on to, or taken off our total, what's going to be developed there, is one question. And the other question, or fact is, yesterday, for those that have moaned about Severn Trent, we was all invited to a seminar at Four Mark Reservoir yesterday, for which I went to, and I was Billy No Mates, nobody else, not one other councillor was there. And they did, I did bring up the question about the consultation process on planning, etc., that they're very shy at coming forward with any consultation. So just for a point of fact. Thank you, Chair.
So in terms of the allocation Ashbourne Airfield, that is contained within our local plan. For all intents and purposes, we are considering that will be that will continue to form part of our strategic housing requirements going forward. It's our largest allocation. It's a brownfield site. There is now a little bit of momentum on bringing that site forward. So, we are, for all intents and purposes, envisaging that will form part of this review process. That doesn't necessarily mean to say that it makes any dent in what we're doing, because it's already in essence been taken into account.
So will that be classed as a new settlement, or still part of Ashbourne, or a new village, or will it come into under that category?
In essence, we're seeing it as a sustainable urban extension to Ashbourne. I think when we're thinking about a new village, then I think we're looking at something that's a little bit more freestanding and standalone.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, members. I think that exhausts the questions as far as I'm aware. If anyone's got any appetite for debate as well, then we'll go on. But can somebody, first of all, propose the recommendations so that we can start the ball rolling in debate, if that's what you want to do? And bearing in mind, of course, that recommendation 2, the consultation questions, we will be going through those shortly, but so that it's to say draft responses. So if that's the recommendation, yeah.
So did I hear you correctly? So we're going to go through 104 questions in this committee. That's unacceptable, I think. This is not what the committee is for, to go through line by line 104 questions. You seriously are not proposing that, are you?
Well, we are, because the timetable is such that we won't have opportunities for further questions within the time available to our officers to respond to the government.
But I think Mike has already asked the whole committee to walk away from the meeting tonight, review the questions that we think are applicable to us.
You can do that in addition, yes.
And then feed a bit. I'm not prepared to sit through a meeting where we go through 104 questions line by line. So I will give my apologies once that starts, and I will leave the meeting. Right. That is a waste of everyone's time. I think that's ill thought out. I think it's a lack of respect to everyone's time, and I think it's absolutely appalling.
Well, I'm sorry, but some members of the Labour group, in fact, have put forward suggestions supplementary to the ones that Mike has come up with as drafts already, and that needs to be considered. And we haven't got another meeting planned. The timetable is very tight, as Mike has explained. The deadline is the 24th of this month for a response to the government. And the main thing that they've done, apart from describing the changes in long reports, the main thing they've proposed is 105, 106 questions, which they want answers to. So it's not our fault that we've been given so little time to go through this process. So,
as councillors with little knowledge in most of these areas, how are we experts to give an opinion in this meeting? It's absolutely, this is why we have paid professional officers to put the proposal to us. We then add value, hopefully. But sitting here going through 104 questions in a committee It's just the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard in my whole life.
But we're looking at Mike's and the officers' responses to those questions. So, can I just ask Mike if you want to respond to that?
Well, I can understand where Councillor Whitehead is coming from, and I think it is incumbent upon committee to give consideration to the questions that we've got, and I think the possible way forward is rather than necessarily looking at each individual on a line-by-line basis, because that clearly will be very time-consuming, and it's not a productive use of this committee's time. And certainly, I don't want to be here until 10 o'clock because going through every single word on it. I think maybe an alternative way of looking at it, Councillor Whitehead, might be just to go through things on a page-by-page basis, and if any particular issues that stand out for any members on that page, very briefly to highlight them to us as officers, and we could then address that. And if members want to make any more detailed comments, such as what Councillor Wayne has suggested in relation to a couple of questions, then those can then be sent through to me by email by the end of next week, and then we can look to incorporate those in. So I think it allows us to go through these fairly quickly, bearing in mind that there's quite a significant number of these questions relating to the green belt, which we don't have any green belt of, and there's no answers or responses to those questions within this particular document. I don't think we necessarily need to spend lots and lots of time, but I think we can just go through it on a fairly quick basis. If there's any substantial objections, then we can have them raised. If they need a bit more elaboration, then they can come back to us.
Yeah,
Does that seem reasonable? Yeah.
We did agree.
It seems reasonable, but I'm not being fair because I know what we're all like. And so I really appreciate the word brief, but I've never been in a council meeting, and I've been a councillor for a year now, where any councillors hardly ever brief. So I would imagine once the day gets going, even if you're only doing half the questions or kind of page by page, what I need, Martin, is probably a commitment from you as chair that you're actually going to hold people to account, not allow people to kind of say the same thing over and over again.
I do intend
then
to
I'd be happy to stay. I'm not really prepared to stay past 8 o'clock, though.
Yeah, we did agree before this meeting that we'd go through it page by page, not line by line. So, yes, I will be quite strict in terms of time that members are spending on suggested responses. Yes, Councillor Chapman, yeah.
On terms of brevity, I mean, let's take question 1. Do you agree that we should reverse the December 2023 changes made to paragraph 61? What if half of us agree and half of us don't agree, and then we have a debate on question 1? How can we do this in a block when every question is different? There's bound to be debate on that, even something as simple as that. Say I don't agree, and Councillor Whitehead doesn't agree, and others do agree. We could be here over the weekend.
Yeah. Mike, have you got any? There's no solution to that, really, is there, in terms of the timescale?
We have got a limited timescale. We've got until the 24th of September to put a response in. I'm not suggesting we stay here until the 24th of September and debate everything. But nevertheless, we do need to agree. And what we've done as officers is provide you with our draft responses to the questions. And as I was saying before, I think if there's anything that stands out you think is significantly at odds with where you're coming from, then that's where we need to highlight, rather than necessarily saying it's we want to go through it on a line-by-line basis.
In view of the time we've already spent from Councillor Whitehead's question and Councillor Chapman's, if we have another debate on the process, then we won't even start looking at these questions, will we, tonight? So if you can keep your...
Can I move the recommendations,
very
Chair, then?
Yeah.
Can I move the recommendations so we can get started?
Yeah. Is there a seconder? Councillor Nash. Thank you. Right, who wants to make a very, very brief point about this process?
Can I just ask, Chair? I know we're saying about we don't want to go through. Are there questions that that are in there that are really pertinent to our local plan of what you feel that is the basis, because we're trying to, it's changing the MPPF, which is the government's overall. Are there questions in here that are literally pertinent to how it affects for us to do our local plan that we can look at more in depth? Because as all the other members have said, you know, we aren't up on this, and I just think for us to be making a full decision on something like this I think it should be something that's to our local plan.
Councillor G.
Is this actually the debate?
Well, it's been proposed and seconded.
So this is the debate. Right. So first of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Whitehead for his intervention there, because he's completely right. I mean, for me, the purpose of this meeting is to gather a flavour of our reaction to this paper. And we need to see if this council is united for the aspiration or against it. And I know we've got to look at making a response to protect Derbyshire Dales, but I mean, Councillor Whitehead is totally right, so I'll go along with him with that. Let me start by saying that I think I'm the only member of this council that during the process that I've taken part in the local plan working group, and you know, we had a meeting of the community environment, I'm the only one who actually casts any dispersion to the level and aspiration of the figures in the reviewed local plan in terms of the housing targets. Because, you know, I did actually make a point. I didn't vote against it because I bowed down to the exceptional expertise of our officers in their scrutiny of what we actually need in terms of houses and what we can deliver. But the 217 I always thought was too low, and I thought the original plan figures, aspirations we had was about just under 300. That was more appropriate, which is about 25–30% more. But nevertheless, I assumed the whole council was quite happy with the plan we were going forward with and the targets that we had, and that was sufficient. And that even Councillor O'Brien, you know, we had a little interaction at one of the meetings. They explained to me that that was sufficient because we had a dying population, which I didn't agree with, actually. I thought we do need to provide houses for young people. But, you know, I'm faced here with a situation where the figure of just over 3,000 is going to a figure of about 9,000, which is nearly a 200% uplift. You know, this proposed new standard methodology is nonsense where Derbyshire Dales is concerned. It's totally inappropriate for Derbyshire Dales. It's Labour who are asking us for this 200% uplift. Now, I've heard some comments. I think it was Councillor Shelley said this is giving the green light for rampant development. And he's right, because we can't draw a line underneath it. Developers are going to be having a laugh. And I think Councillor Dobbs made a good point about, you know, where is it going to affect house values? Well, what actually happens is the developers will build what they want and what they think they can sell. And they will build houses that they can sell, and it won't necessarily be to people who need houses in Derbyshire Dales. It'll be people moving from outside who are pocketing a lot of money, coming to Derbyshire Dales and buying a lovely house and having a big wedge in the back pocket. And that happens all over the place. And, you know, I'm really worried about this. I think I've had Andy Nash makes a good point about the government and, you know, in terms of it rushing to this, because we know Labour are trying to get its policies through in speed. But, you know, when you do things fast like this, you make bad decisions. You know, probably they've only got 4 years, but we need to make sure on Derbyshire Dales that they don't damage this area too much. Because I actually think that we had a good plan going forward. And, you know, we were being sensible. You know, Roger's made a good point that we've already got developments going off in Cowder Quarry. You know, we've got the Ashbourne development, and we've got little developments all over Derbyshire Dales, and there are going to be houses in the Peak National Park. You know, I want to see affordable houses in Bakewell on a sensible level, but this is completely nonsensical. And we're talking about new towns. I mean, what do you want to put Milton Keynes in Derbyshire Dales? Because I'm worried what's going to happen with this. You know, we need to be robust in our response to the government, and we need to remember that 4 years isn't very long. Sit on it and make sure we protect our green fields, because, and I think this casts a shadow over the so-called, what they call it, progressive alliance, because I think we might have a new alliance now on this council, because I'm a Conservative and I don't agree with these aspirations and these figures. I think they're completely ridiculous.
Councillor Whitehead made a point about going into debate and going through the questions and not having long rambling conversations. And while Councillor Lee made a good contribution, it took nearly 5 minutes. And unless we get focused on this, I mean, there are some things on the questions that are missing, like the points that Councillor Butler made when he first arrived. Our response is silent on climate change, and it really shouldn't be. We do need to add at least the bits he's put in there. And there's probably 3 or 4 other questions that are crucial. 90% of them, there's probably not a lot of dissension about. Perhaps it's worth just taking the Labour motions of where we had questions, because there's only about half a dozen.
Yeah. Councillor Dobbs.
Can I make a suggestion? I take Councillor Nash's point, actually, that might be a good way forward. But there's some open-ended questions for which there is no response or no specific response, or we want to add responses. The government wants to know things from us. And would it not be a good idea, particularly on water infrastructure, to take those first? And I think they begin at circa 80. If that would be acceptable, if we have a look at those, and can we put forward some proposals where they're simply asking for advice from us? I agree, this is not ideal. This is bad news for us as it stands. It's probably not going to be tweaked very much, so we're going to have to learn how to live with it. But they do ask for a response. Let's give a response as Derbyshire Dales District Council and see if that gets any traction. Picking up Councillor Wayne's point about infrastructure. And whilst I'm speaking, if I could add one, why not make Severn Trent as a compulsory adopter of all aspects of water disposal? We've heard, probably Councillor Lees heard yesterday, that they're going to expand Carsington Reservoir, massive amount. What Severn Trent appears to have forgotten, that what comes out of the tap ends up going down the drain, and it's got to be disposed of. And there doesn't seem to be any particular, that I'm aware of, and perhaps Councillor Lees did hear something about expansion in that direction. But in questions 80 onwards, I think we have an opportunity to make a response, perhaps in more detail than is there at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you've heard, our group has submitted a number of points which my colleagues are going to speak to, but I've just got 3 points I want to make which have occurred to me during the discussion. Firstly, I would like us to emphasise that housing need within a national park, however we identify and define it, is met within the national park, unless the National Park Authority can demonstrate that extreme harm would be caused by that. I think that reflects the commitment of this council, and certainly those who represent national park communities. So I would like that to form part of the response. On strategic planning, having been involved in strategic planning previously, if you do it sequentially, it makes the plan-making process ridiculously long. It takes probably 10 years to get from start to finish. So to me, that's not the right way forward. I would like to see us argue that we plan strategically through the duty to cooperate. So when local authorities are preparing their local plans, they are required to cooperate strategically,
rather than bolt something on the front end first. I think that's a much more effective way forward. And secondly, a point made by a number of colleagues around the difficulties we have in the interim before our a new local plan is adopted, and that the fact that we have a planning pistol held to our heads in terms of applications for residential development. I think we should make representations to the government as part of this, that if the planning period is extended by up to 12 months, then that is taken into account when we're faced with the issues relating to our 5-year land supply. 'Cause I don't want us to be placed. We know we've got issues coming up in Matlock with a forthcoming planning appeal, and I don't want that situation to be replicated ad nauseum if we have to add 12 months onto the process. And finally, Councillor Buckler made a very good point about ensuring that we do some pre-planning. The local plan subcommittee is likely to have at least an informal meeting within the next 3 or 4 weeks to start addressing the issues we're discussing this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Can we move to a vote now then, please? It's been proposed and seconded that we approve the 3 recommendations that officers have put forward to us tonight. So kind of all in favour, please? Sorry? No, we deal with that separately. Yeah. I think is that unanimous? I think it is. Yes, right. Okay, thanks, members. But we now do move on to the 106 questions, or in some. Before we do that. Yeah.
Sorry. Ask a question before we start, Chair. Right, Councillor Whitehead's quite rightly said it's impossible to get through all these questions tonight. That's obvious. I think we all agree with that. Is it possible that the officers could have looked through these questions and just highlighted, same as the water, what Councillor Dobson spoke about, the different areas where we would be slightly differences? Is it possible officers could look through that? I know he's putting a lot of work on officers to look at them, and then we could bring them questions forward, what the officers feel that we should make a response on. Would that be an easy way to do it?
Chair, I think what we're trying to set out in the suggested responses we've got at the moment is trying to reflect upon the position as officers we feel is appropriate to send back to government. But I also do recognise the fact that there are areas within here that potentially we could enhance, and certainly some of the points that have been made tonight around infrastructure are ones that we can look at enhancing. And Councillor Wayne, you know, if you don't mind, I can, sending me some comments through, I can start to work those up into a much more sort of elaborate response than what we have. And there are other questions within here which you feel we've got drastically wrong, or you'd like to see a little bit more elaboration on. Take the point around strategic planning, I take the point about delays and that, and I will go through them again and try to seek to enhance them a little bit further based upon the sort of like the mood music that's come from this evening's meeting.
Thank you, Mike.
But we have tried to provide members with in most cases a fairly comprehensive response, particularly where we felt as officers, you as members would want to make that particular point. And part of the reason for having the discussion we had last week around this is to try and, feed into this process. And I think, that has done. It may not have hit the mark on every single one, I accept that, but, we've tried to do that. And where there are longer answers, that's trying to reflect some of the points that we've been discussing and debating this evening.
Right. Councillor Buckler.
Yeah, I'm missing something. You've got a series of points from page 191 of this report onwards, the table of questions. It's about 10 pages. It's not can we say, yes, we think this response is reasonable? That's not a. We don't have to go through the whole 104 questions. You've got 10 pages of answers.
Yes, I agree with you, Councillor Butler.
Isn't that what we're doing? It's not massive, is it?
Yeah. If we can make a start then with page 1 of the, in fact, of the table of questions, that's 1 to 5 basically.
Well, yeah. But if we say that we're going to do that, and
I should also point out that all members have had a chance to look at these questions in advance anyway. So if they had any points to make on certain ones, then they can raise those tonight. Okay, thank you. Would someone like to propose that we accept the draft responses to questions 1 to 5 on page 1 of the table of questions?
Can I just ask a question, please, Chair, very quickly? I'm aware that Councillor O'Brien sent an email out to certain people in relation to, and some of those will be relating to this. Is he going to come in, or somebody going to come in with the amendments that they would seek to say? Because it's a waste of time us saying yes, and then there's going to be some difference. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It won't be the final approval for these because Mike's already said he's going to go away. So all we can say tonight is, in principle, we're in support of what's here. Yeah. And the understanding is that if you've had commentary externally from either the Labour group or individuals like Councillor Swain, you'll build that in. So my question would be, do we get a chance to see them again before they go off? Or do we have to accept Steve, Mike and Councillor Burfoot decision as the next final thing?
You to me might help on this, but you've just voted, you've just approved a recommendation to give delegated authority to essentially Steve, myself and Councillor Burfoot to finalise it. But it will be on the understanding that if there are any further comments you want to make, to send those through to me by the end of next week, and then I, with Steve and with Councillor Burfoot, will seek to incorporate them in an appropriate way.
Going to move on to page 2? Or?
Sorry, did we do page 1?
Well, wait, I asked about page 1. I thought nobody had any points to make. So.
Okay, do it.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
Obviously, as Councillor Wayne alluded to, and obviously Councillor O'Brien did send these questions and put his comments. Well, obviously, question 2, and I've just jotted it down from his email, question 2, question 3 are on the very first page. So in my aspects, then because Councillor O'Brien's put it there, can he not say what his feelings are to them two there, and then let us all hear what that is? And then, because obviously if we say yes, we're going back on ourselves. But as far as I'm concerned now, we're going over as something that we've already voted that we're going to be accepting anyway, which to me, I think we're going beyond backwards road on here. We've already agreed to this because we've put the motion on the table and we've agreed. As far as I'm concerned, the meeting is closed. We should have been doing this in questions or in debate. Sorry, but that's how I feel. But if we are looking at the questions, and I do feel if there are some councillors that have actually put something in, like Councillor O'Brien, maybe some of the others, and obviously Councillor Butler who makes some comments about things, let's go to those questions. So question 2, question 3, put your case forward, and then we'll see whether that needs adding or taking away. And if we agree with that, I think that would be the better way than going through as page 1, page 2, because we're just going to be going round and round in circles.
We've got to agree a consensus tonight. I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, I think we should have done that prior to us actually voting on the recommendations. I'm sorry to say that. I think, but hey ho.
That was subject to obviously looking at these questions at some stage and at the end of the report as well. So and those are the questions that have been put to us by the ministry.
I understand that,
yeah, that's right. But
voting on something when we haven't read it and done it, it just seems the wrong way around. But hey ho,
well,
carry on.
It's Councillor Nash.
On question 3, can we emphasise that the uplift of urbans should still be there? It's not quite clear. It's a bit woolly, our answer. So I think it just needs bolstering up a little bit.
Yeah, I have sight of Councillor O'Brien's responses, and I think I was trying to say in the sort of introduction that there is a sort of a need to look at whatever methodology, whatever way it can be done to try and ensure that there's an element of sort of the locational factors taken into account that tries to reflect in general terms a district, a local authority's rurality or urban basis, and tries to then make sure that actually in terms of delivering sustainable communities, which is also what we as an authority and others want to aspire to, would ensure that you're moving and pushing more of the development into the urban areas where service and facilities are, and by definition are more sustainable.
Given the mood of the meeting and to save me keep asking questions, are there any of the responses that Peter's sent back on behalf of the Labour group that you disagree with that we need to talk about? Because if you accept the rest, it'll be a lot quicker.
On that, I thought question 2, I do think you need the alternatives. So it was Mike's original response. I was happier with, to be honest, than Peter O'Brien's.
And in terms of that particular question, I tend to agree with Councillor Dobbs that sort of trying to sort of read between the lines in terms of what Councillor O'Brien was saying, and that we have a situation that if we maintain the consistency of approach, and I can see there's a benefit in having a consistent approach nationally, but in areas like ourselves where the data is available only at a local authority level, there needs to be some guidance provided as to how we deal with those splits. And to be fair, it's something that we have grappled with as a planning authority for many, many years now. And we've had lots and lots of debates and lots of thoughts about how we might even divide what we've got at the moment between the National Park and ourselves. So I think that generally there needs to be a recognition that in places like Derbyshire Dales and others where national parks split local planning authorities or local authorities into pieces, if you like, that there should be some guidance that gives us a sort of an exception to the norm.
Councillor Shelley.
Just a brief one on the urban uplift thing. I know we're not talking about the same thing here. We're not an urban uplift area, but I would be concerned if there were any credence given to the idea that the existing urban areas within Derbyshire Dales are somehow suitable for mass expansion on the basis that they are urban areas, because they're clearly not. The infrastructure there is stuck in a historic pattern.
Derbyshire Dales is a rural area.
Okay.
And by government definition, we are a rural area, notwithstanding what the sort of patterns of development are within the area. And when I talk about rural areas, I'm talking about that as a generality rather than necessarily a specific.
Mike? Right, 6 to 15, page 2 of the questions and draft answers. Question on number 7 about definition of the word deliverable. If you want to make some comment on that, Mike.
cogs are whirring. I think in terms of the draft response that we put in relation to question 7, one of the issues that the December 23 version of the NPPF had inserted was a whole series of different approaches to how much housing land supply local authorities had, depending upon where they were at in relation to the preparation of their local plan and the outdatedness or otherwise of their local plan. And in certain circumstances, the government was suggesting you could actually have a 4-year supply as opposed to 5-year supply. And it made it a really complicated position. And the government has made it very clear in terms of this NPPF that they're saying, let's do away with all that. We just go back to what we had before, which is a very clear 5-year supply requirement at any point in time. The point about deliverability is, and I think, is that the definition of deliverability has changed over time, but the government in its previous guise has tightened up on the definition of deliverability, which has actually made it worse for us as a local planning authority because it's tightened up on what it defines deliverable sites to be. Whilst the loosening up of the definition of deliverability might be beneficial to us in terms of 5-year supply, given what we're at, it may give a false sense of security in terms of actually an unrealistic position of what our land supply is, and actually it might lead to lower rates of development when you look at it nationally. So I don't think I can see the government actually changing the definition of deliverability and deliverable sites going forward. I think what we've got is a pretty realistic position. It's like, are those sites actually going to happen or part to be delivered within that 5-year period? And whilst it might have caused us some angst and it causes some issues in terms of what we can include, and we've had discussions in this chamber in the past about that, I don't think the government will change that definition. So I think the issue is making sure that we understand that now there is just a 5-year supply requirement. There is no complicated arrangements in different locations depending upon where you are, which the government introduced previously.
Thanks, Mike. Is everybody happy with this page then up to question 15?
Except I wonder whether that question 7 is the point to make about the fact that the deliverability is really in the hands of the market providers. So there should be a government recognition.
Thank you, Councillor Shelley. Can we move to question 16 onwards then, to question 25? Be nearly a quarter of the way through then. Quite a few of those have got no answers anyway, or not applicable to us, so we can take out 4 or 5 of them in any case. So, has anyone any comments to make on those?
Question 19.
19, yes.
I mean, I would say that the government should recognise the fact that certain authorities, including ours, have spent a lot of time and effort and money on commissioning external consultants to come up with assessments of our housing needs. In fact, within the last 6 months, if I remember right, and that should be seriously taken into account.
Yeah. Chair, could I suggest, I think it was made, very relevant point made by Councillor Shelley on and others on how we approach the issue of stock not currently in permanent residential use. I think we perhaps need to draw attention, along with other authorities in the same position where that is quite a high proportion, there needs to be a consistent approach to how that affects the answer to question 19.
Okay, everybody happy with that?
Affordable, Chair. What are we still coming up again? Comes up in planning regularly. Affordable. What is affordable? What's affordable in Derbyshire Dales and what's affordable in London is two different total situations. So I think we ought to just put something that helps the Dales, really.
Comments on that, Mike?
Well, in terms of the questions on the page 193, the question 17 is the one that talks about affordability. That is there as part of the methodology. It seeks to try and identify areas where there is greatest need based upon the ability of people to afford property. Elsewhere within the consultation, it does talk about the tenure, if you like, the tenure types. So there's a distinction between how affordability has affected the calculation of need, but within the consultation where it does talk about effectively tenure types, it does provide much more emphasis on affordable rented and social rented properties as a priority in comparison to discounted market housing, where certainly in Derbyshire Dales, the value, the levels of income don't necessarily support the ability of people to provide and purchase even discounted market housing, because even with the discounts, they still become unaffordable. So the reflection in the consultation responses, and hopefully I've tried to capture, is one of support for both the affordability being built into the need, but also in terms of the tenure types that are most appropriate. And that's reflected in, hopefully reflected in the response.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor G.
Yeah, on the issue of affordable houses, and I'm always a bit in disagreement with arbitrary levels of, when developers are asked to deliver 30% affordable houses in a development, because I know the government probably has some aspiration to increase that, uplift that. But what you actually do in the long run is increase the price of the market houses, the other 70%. So the people who are actually aspiring to own houses, gain mortgages, pay deposits, they're actually paying additional house price cost because of this. The developers obviously is trying to take the profit, more profit out of the market houses. So it actually makes 70% of the development more unaffordable.
Councillor Slack.
Totally disagree, Chair. I think if we don't have affordable housing, a lot of people who are in desperate need of housing will go by the board. I mean, we will split society in two. I think that approach is wrong, totally wrong. I think we've got to have affordable housing. And to make the excuse that it puts up other housing is not relevant.
I'd be happy with this page 193 now.
Just on affordable housing, I think we need to be very careful between affordable and social rent.
Yeah.
And a lot of this document talks about social rent now rather than affordable houses and the move to that. And that will be a massive bonus for the Derbyshire Dales.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, if I can quickly come in,
yeah,
and
sure.
There lies the massive problem that actually providing the social rent that we need, and I totally agree with Councillor Slack if that's what he means by affordable, it's actually getting that stuff and funding that stuff. It's all very well for the developers to come in, but at this moment, the streams, Homes England money, cannot pick up those S106 gains from the volume developer, and that's going to be a huge problem.
Right. Thank you, members. Right, yes, Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, I'll move us on to the next page because question 48 surely is exactly the question that pertains to affordable housing, because the question on that one is about removing the requirement to deliver 10% on major sites as affordable. And we've said yes to that. We agree.
Affordable home ownership. Affordable home ownership. So it's taken away essentially things like a discounted market house or a first home, where it's essentially a property that's discounted, the open market value is discounted by 10, 20, 30% or maybe even more. Because even if you factor in those discounts, because of the income levels in Derbyshire Dales, those product types, those tenure types are not affordable to the mass majority of residents. So the move towards, and the emphasis within the document of social rents as a preference is to be welcomed, because effectively that's the type of need that we have in Derbyshire Dales.
But surely,
by removing the requirement of 10% for affordable home ownership, it's saying actually you should then be delivering more in the other tenure types.
But surely not everyone wants to rent, do they? So surely we still have aspiration for people to want to own their own homes. I absolutely support building more rentable property, more social homes. But we as an authority, we also have to support aspiration to own your own home, whether you're a young couple or whether you're an elderly person wanting to move into your own bungalow somewhere. So I find that completely disagreeable that we would agree for any removal kind of linked to home ownership. Surely we can support both, can't we? We can support social rents and support home ownership. I'm a bit puzzled. Have we gone anti-home ownership all of a sudden?
Sorry. Not gone anti-home ownership, but what we're saying is that the removal and the emphasis that is being put into the NPPF now is much more reflective, and it's based upon the evidence that we've collected over many, many years. You know, I've worked for the authority for over 20 years, and over those 20 years, consistently the evidence that we've had has been that we need more affordable homes within the social rented sector, be that affordable rent or social rent, is what we need. And that given the levels of, you know, there will be an aspiration, for people to own their own homes. And but in terms of the evidence we have, that is not the vast majority of need, where the vast majority of need comes from. And that type of product is not necessarily affordable to the vast majority of people that are going to be in need.
Councillor O'Brien.
Well, I need to say I 100% agree with Councillor Whitehead on this position. I don't think we should polarise society in this way. And I need to stand up for the residents in my ward who desperately seek the ability to be able to afford to buy a house. And I think all I would say is it should be for the planning system to find a way to make that happen.
I don't think, I think,
yeah, Councillor Nash.
It's not very often I agree with Councillor O'Brien, but I can't see how the planning policy and way forward can actually dictate market forces and the cost of living. House prices will be set by demand. So unless we pave over the whole of England with houses and make them 10 a penny, then they are always going to be expensive. And I'm afraid there is always going to be people that can't afford them. I would welcome everybody to get on the housing ladder, because it is the best way for wealth creation and to pass wealth on to your family. But for a lot of people, that's not a viable option. And we need to be thinking about how do we help the most of our communities in our constituency, not just the aspirational ones. The aspirational ones will find a way to do it anyway.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Martin, Chair. Looking at this issue, we're moving into a different recently with the Liz Truss trashing the economy, and we're in a different area now where we see there's a great need for social housing. Yeah, I agree. I'd love to see more people getting their own homes and buying their own homes like Peter suggested, but we have to put the emphasis on social housing now. Like we did after the war years, we had social housing, and we've got to provide for the majority of people in this country what will never, ever get an house, their own house. So I think we've got to look at this different. We're in a different area now. We've been trashed by the previous government, and we're in we're in a big hole. So I don't think we're going to achieve own ownership to any great length as we used to do. So, sorry, Chair, I'm being pessimistic, but that's how we are and where we are. Thank you.
Councillor Wayne.
Yeah, it's just very quick. I'm maybe not getting a full grasp of all this, but surely we should be giving everybody, regardless of what their income is, an opportunity. And if we go down one particular route, that then stops somebody else from doing it. And at the end of the day, we need to provide all types of houses for all types of people, particularly in this area, because there are some people who, maybe the more affluent, can enable their children to get on the housing ladder here. And at the end of the day, to cut some people loose and say we're not giving that provision or minimal provision, I don't agree with that. I do agree that we should be providing social rent, but I also agree we should be allowing people to buy the houses. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I wasn't saying we shouldn't disregard people who want to try, but our emphasis should be on social and affordable housing.
Councillor Shelley.
There's a huge consensus here, basically. Everyone's agreeing with everybody else, so we just need to find the right form of words. Perhaps we could focus attention more on question 52 and 54, which are the ones where we really need to put the boot into the government. Sorry, I don't mean it quite like that. In terms of how they enable the money to get through to the social housing providers. I don't think we've quite put the priority on that. Social housing providers in rural areas. I think those are the two questions where we can add some extra weight to that, please. And yes, take out the word yes from question 48, please.
Any comments on that, Mike? Oh, have we got consensus now so we can move forward?
Yeah, I think the position is one that's based on evidence and based upon the approach that the district council has taken over many years in relation to its prioritisation of what the type of affordable housing should be provided. And Council Slack sets that out very clearly, that it should be prioritised around the delivery of rented property, be affordable rent or social rent, because that's essentially going to be the greatest opportunity for people to access homes in Derbyshire Dales. Home ownership products, be they discounted market housing or be they shared ownership, where an element are products which, in relation to shared ownership, are very difficult and not particularly supported by the mortgage market. First homes is a product which the government has introduced. It's partially supported by the mortgage market, but the evidence that we have does not support that as being a product which is wholly suitable for the vast majority of those within Derbyshire Dales. And that's why we're suggesting that the emphasis should, we're supporting the sort of removal of that emphasis of affordable home ownership as being part of that policy requirement for developers to achieve. And that means that they're then focused on delivering what we have evidence as being those types of tenure that are most appropriate and most in need in Derbyshire Dales.
I'm happy with that. Well,
just a comment on that, really, because I mean, I'd hope we wouldn't make the same mistakes that we made in the past, because What I'd hate to see is us to start throwing up basically what would be termed the old council estates. Surely we don't do that anymore. Surely we have integrated living across the social classes, and we don't create ghettos anywhere. And so I'd really want, I look forward to seeing what the local plan committee come up with in terms of the solution to that, in terms of how we ensure whether it's social rent or affordable housing is built into future kind of developments, particularly major developments. I would say I'm really disappointed if we take, if we only have the focus on social rents. I don't think that truly reflects the feeling of the committee, Mike. So I would ask you to sort of maybe have a think about rephrasing that committee, because while you might be comfortable with what you see as the evidence and your own opinion, I think you do have to reflect back some of the comments that you've heard tonight.
Is that okay, Mike?
I understand where Councillor Whitehead is coming from. I will reflect upon that. I will have a discussion with Rob Coggins, the Director of Housing, in relation to the responses, because these responses are not solely my authorship. They are authored jointly with Rob as well, and some of these questions around the the affordable housing questions, in terms of the response, they've been drafted by Rob, and they're based upon a long-standing understanding of what the housing market needs in terms of affordable housing for Derbyshire Dales. And the point you make about, developments on major sites, we've been doing it for 20 years. There are many examples of sites across the district where affordable housing and open market housing sit cheek by jowl together successfully. And we have been a significant contributor in financial terms, and the point that Councillor Shelley makes is the right one. The money and the subsidy has come from a number of different sources. Increasingly, it's coming from our own purse rather than necessarily from Homes England. And that's coming from from our own purse and capital reserves, or partly from Section 106 agreements. But there are many examples across the district where we've achieved integrated development with social, affordable homes, cheap by jowl with open market houses successfully in many parts of the district. So, that model has worked well, and I don't see necessarily a significant need for a significant change away from that. What we're saying here is that the government's approach is one that we should support, because it's actually supporting the approach that we've been taking for many years, and our policies have been very clear in the past about saying that we should be delivering 80% as social rent and 20% as a shared ownership product. And that's based upon the evidence, and that's the approach we've taken.
Your answer was brilliant,
I'll try and I'll look the video back and try and transcribe it back into the question and the answer.
Right, Councillor G and then Councillor Linthwaite.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Councillor Whitehead, really, because I want to make sure that young people who are doing well in our schools, and we've got some really good schools, and, currently some of them are starting university, there will be in the future. I want them to go to those places, get good qualifications, good jobs, and I want them to be able to come back to Derbyshire Dales and buy a house, live here and bring up the family. That's what we want. We want to make sure that we look on the upside and make sure we create a strong, vibrant Derbyshire Dales for those young people to think, yes, I can come back to Derbyshire. I don't have to go off and live somewhere else because there's nowhere for me to go.
Councillor Linthwaite.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, the affordable housing term, I feel is very much a comfort blanket term to make us all feel warm and fluffy, and that we're doing something for young people who are aspirational and wanting to buy their own homes. one of the comments I get frequently when new developments come along and there are affordable houses, many of the young people that I know, many of the young people I have taught and have now finished university and are looking for work and homes, is for whom is that affordable? I taught them proper English. And a lot of the affordable houses are still very expensive. As Mike has already said, salaries are low in Derbyshire Dales. If we want people to come back, we've got to do a lot more about developing our economy and higher value employment so that young people can afford even the affordable houses. And in terms of what Mike was just saying in terms of mixed housing, I totally agree. We don't want to have ghettos. But within my own ward, we have small developments that have market houses, have shared ownership houses and social rent houses, all on the same development, and it's working very nicely. So, it is possible. And I think, but we have to be very careful about how we use this term affordable housing, because that means different things to different people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just add, Chair, I don't agree at all with the dogmatic approach adopted by the government here. I think the evidence is that and this is a response to the national planning policy. This is not specific to Derbyshire Dales, it's national planning policy. If national planning policy does not accept that the consequences of not finding a way of enabling younger families to find a way onto the housing ladder, the evidence is they leave the district, they leave the area. And I think all we're saying is, what I'm saying, I think colleagues agree, is that shall be recognised by the government.
Thank you. Can we move on to, Councillor Dobbs, sorry.
Very quickly, just to, I think, can we get away from this ghetto idea? This is just not current practice, and some entirely housing provider, housing association developed sites, you get a quality of house that actually puts the volume developers puts them to shame, and that'll be the problem, bringing up the standard of that which is provided by the volume developer to that which is experienced by those on those housing association finance sites, Homes England finance sites.
Can we move to questions 53 to 63 on page 196 then? Any comments on any of those?
I've made the reference already, Chair, to question 54.
You have, that's right.
Need to beef that one up.
Yeah. Right. Okay. We move on to 197 then. That's questions 64 to 72.
Obviously, 71 is exactly the point that Councillor Wayne and I alluded to.
Okay. We're doing quite well at the moment, so can we... Councillor Whitehead's benefit, I think, yeah. 198. That's question 73 to 82. Councillor Butler.
Yeah.
And then Councillor Dobbs.
I've been left with a lot of answers for this. I'm quite happy
is that question 78?
73, 74, 75, 76, 78, 77, 79 and 80.
Okay.
Would you like them, or would you like me to give you the piece of paper which has got them written on it?
If you can summarise and then give me the paper, that would be easy, and then members can have a view on whether or not they concur.
I don't think there'll be any disagreements with 74. There's a slight sort of emphasis of it. What the suggestion, I think it comes from the is for 75, 76, and 77. The answer should be yes. I accept your responses to it. We need to know more of what that is. And part of that is, I think some of those should be determined locally, but obviously there's quite a lot of impact on capacity of us to do those to respond to those. Does that make sense? Would you like me to read the answer that I've got for 78? Reference to the IPCC and its 6th report 2023 plus the UK Government Climate Change Act should be included in the MPPF introduction and overview, accepting their goals explicitly. Mitigation and adaptation will be innovative and ongoing as the situation changes. Technologies and approaches should be iteratively improved through building control review, design guidance, and be expected to be made available to all types of future developments. So I think that it's quite important that it needs to be adaptive as the situation changes. A holistic approach to adaptation would be helpful. Fire, flood, drought, heat waves all threaten huge local costs. And so we've got, we need to make sure that we're looking at those sort of things, yeah. So that's the stuff around adaptation. I think I agree with this about there are good tools available for question 79. There are good tools available. We've got to do something to count carbon. It's one of the things that we've want to do as a council, to make sure that we are counting carbon and we are reducing the budget of the council as a whole. And so we should be, if we pass that on to the developers, we need to make sure that we are counting it so that we've got a holistic view of it. And yeah, question 80 about flood risk. It will be really helpful to look at that holistically, because at the moment the situation is that each development has to be looked at individually, and looking at flood risk reduction from a strategic point of view, and thinking about this from a the context of what has gone before. Is going to be more and more important, because that's going to get more problematic over the next 20 or 30 years.
Sorry, can I just add to 80? For some reason, the developments in this town were never ever done sequentially. They were always done individually, and that is something. When we say about the approach being taken, it appears to work well, I think it is, in setting the appropriate risk base. Now, I really think that we need to have more dialogue with the Environment Agency, particularly. They will not go anywhere near you. If it's going to be developed in flood zone 1, they're not bothered. But it's in flood zones 2 and 3 that they start to get a bit windy. But what they don't look at, and this is the issue with the Knowlston Place, is that it's the impact of the development up there that has the impact on their development down there, and yet they will still not take. And those are the issues. But I'll speak with you about that in the week, Mark, if I can, if that's all right with everybody, to follow that through, because I think it does need tightening up. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Dobbs.
It's also in the context of question 80. My specific suggestion is to make the water supplier, Severn Trent, the authority who have to approve SUDs at the planning application stage, and to be responsible to adopt every aspect of the SUD system. That gives them a vested interest in only approving that which works. At the moment, that doesn't have to happen. You can go through planning, certainly at outline stage, and pretty well none of it's fixed. And so the consequences of it not working aren't really taken on board in a way that worries anybody. We'll engineer our way out of this. Well, yes, but at what cost? And to whom?
Are you saying, Peter, that they should at last become a statutory consultee?
Yes.
Yeah. Any more comments on just page 198? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Chapman.
Chair, I wish to comment on question 82 and 83. I think it's horribly flawed. I think it shows a distinct lack of agricultural awareness. And my ongoing question to answer to question 83 anyway is in which to ensure that development supports doesn't comprise food production, don't develop it. Right, because agricultural land classification goes to 5 points. And the points in this suggestion here say that the best and most versatile land as defined in grades 1 to 3A, it's being inferred that they should not be allowed for development. Right, let's move on to classification number 4, which has got 6 subsections, and the description of section 4 starts with excellent agricultural land, which is land capable of growing fruit, vegetables, grass, cereals. In fact, the whole of 4, all the points contain the word excellent. Classification 5 includes forage, grass and rough pasture. Now, if you open forage and rough pasture, the worst one of all, to development or proposed development, then you're wiping out most of Derbyshire Dales, to be honest. You know, it's ridiculous. That's what we raise dairy cattle, we raise beef cattle, we grow cereals, but it stops at 3A as the best and most versatile. Well, if you stop at 3A, you're opening up pretty well every acre of agricultural land in England, basically. So I don't agree with the removal of the text, because it's strengthening the fact that we need to assess, and also we need to make the directive that if land is considered, agricultural land is considered to be inferior, then that should be made to be superior rather than build houses on it. And as I say, that's my answer to question 3. You don't compromise food production, don't build on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, any comments on that?
I can understand where Councillor Chapman is coming from, and it's a notion that I suspect is the reason why the footnote was inserted in the first instance, and the concerns around the impact of particularly solar farms, because the land take that they incur. The comment that I've made in the note is that that was there effectively to try and sort of appease a certain group of the community. The previous approach on best and most versatile worked well for many years without any particular issues, and many decisions were made, including some in Derbyshire Dales, where consideration of best and most versatile agricultural land was a consideration, and that's the reason why I've suggested that going back to the previous version is, doesn't necessarily have a particular concern for us as officers, because it worked well for many years and didn't necessarily have an impact upon food security as people have suggested. The approach that was implemented or was brought forward would appease and address.
Oh, Councillor Slack and then Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Martin. Chair. I agree with Councillor Dobbs and Councillor Wayne that the flooding issue is got to be addressed, and Severn Trent should be more responsible and be accountable. I don't entirely agree that wind turbines are a disaster, like some people like to say they are. In fact, we're in the position now that we haven't been building enough wind turbines for a long time, ever since David Cameron brought his planning, which more or less killed them off for quite a while. If we'd have been building wind turbines, when I worked for the Environment Agency, we had one in 2002, and when another government was in power, and it was very successful. It's still running now. It's paid for itself in 7 years, and at Overside Derby, and it's a great success. I think wind turbines are the easiest way to, especially on land, to produce really. Out at sea, they cost a lot more money. On land, the price of it installing and running and maintaining is much lower, and the productivity from it is much higher than solar panels. We all know that. So we should have been moving to this a long while ago. We've let it drift and drift and drift. And I think if we keep letting it drift, we'll have a country where a carbon footprint is shocking and we're not moving forward. I think we've got to get a carbon footprint. Yeah, some people say, yeah, metal, what goes into building wind turbines, is so much carbon, but we have to, but the degree of it is very little to what we'll get back. So I would promote wind turbines enormously. So that's where I agree with. I agree with most of this, but there's certain aspects where wind turbines should be a priority, in my opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Yes, so I was just going to add a couple of points, and I'm sure probably Matt will cover it in some of the text he's got, particularly on 78. I mean, wouldn't we want to be seeing kind of all new builds built as sustainable housing, either with solar already on, or, I mean, shouldn't that be our comment back in terms of some requirements to put on developers in how they build it? What's the point of building just a standard bricks and mortar house now and not adding anything to it? It's the cheapest time to do it. It's the best time to do it. It kind of makes it a more attractive house. And I think maybe that should form kind of certainly part of our answer. And then the other bit I thought was kind of, is there anything we need to ask in terms of about ourselves as a local authority? Again, linked to question 78, in terms of, will there be support for the council? So instead of putting solar farms on farming land, can't we be more creative? Can't we use our car parks across the Dales to create solar farms and still have car parks there? And I just wonder whether we kind of push some of this back to the government to say, well, what support would you make available to make this happen? Would be kind of some of the context I'd like to see in our answers back.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Nick, for that. Yes, I'd follow on that actually with my standard question on this point, which is the age-old conundrum, which the government does need to address with support, about how you volume build or encourage volume build, particularly at affordable levels, whatever those are, and ensure that the houses are fit for purpose environmentally for the future. And my particular point there would be to enable future designs as part of building regulations to include methods for ensuring heat and air recovery. So this is a step towards passive house standards. It's enabling that to happen, even if that's too expensive to bring in at this stage, rather than preventing it.
Yeah, again, on point 78, we talk about carbon footprint, carbon emissions, carbon this, carbon that, and what we ought to be looking at from a planning situation is the embodied carbon. I mean, I don't know whether people are familiar with that term, but embodied carbon is following the whole life of everything within that building. It starts at things like insisting developers give the reason why they're buying their materials from 40 miles away rather than 20 miles away. So we've got higher transport and higher emissions. It's going further than saying, okay, we'll insulate the walls, but then they'll be asked to what kind of insulation and how can you improve the insulation, how can you make it better climatically advantage, etc. Even through to the end product of the house being demolished. I mean, when you demolish a house that's got concrete in it, if you crush the concrete in the correct way, then that concrete will reabsorb all the carbon dioxide that it produced while it was being burnt in the cement manufacturing system. So and worldwide, embodied carbon produces a significant amount of carbon dioxide. And again, it's not just what the carbon footprint, that it's totally different to the carbon footprint. And it takes it a number of stages forward so that we get a much higher reduction in the carbon emissions of that entity for its whole life, rather than just when it's being built or when it's being insulated. You know, we look at things like, could we use aluminium? Could we use wood instead of aluminium and things like this? You know, straightforward things that need to be put into the national psyche and definitely be made, you know, more strongly made aware of in the MPPF.
Is that it for this page now? Can we move on to making good progress, actually? Page 199, that's, I think, 84 to 96. Does anyone have any comments on those questions? Councillor Wayne.
Yeah, just, I think we've sorted out 84 and 85, but we've got no comment. Are there any other areas of water infrastructure provisions could be improved? So I'll if it's all right with everybody again, we'll put some things, we'll put some things forward about that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Butler.
Yeah, there's some stuff about nature in that as well, in terms of improving the speed with which water goes into the system is going to be really beneficial for that in terms of climate change adaptation as well. So if I can feed into that, that would be good.
Any further comments on this page? No? Move over to the final page then. Especially for Councillor Whitehead. We could finish very soon, probably. 97 to 106. Any comments on those draft answers? Quite a few of them are fairly brief, of course. I had no answer, yes or no. So, no. So if you're happy with those, then that I suppose concludes our responses to all these 106 questions. So thanks very much for your forbearance tonight, and I hope that we can come to some sort of agreement ultimately, myself with Mike and Steve, and we'll see how we can submit a document that's acceptable more or less to most of us.
So will it, when you've got a final draft and you've agreed it between the officers and Martin, will we get a copy of it just to see where you're kind of just before?
Yeah, we can send the final version around once it's gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, members. If you want to, yes. Don't think Tommy wants to. Let's thank Tommy actually for all the work that he's done tonight. We couldn't manage without him.